Good evening. We'll go ahead and get started here. We appreciate you taking the time to come out tonight. I'm Andy Hill. I'm the superintendent of schools here. Todd Carpenter, our treasurer, is with us here this evening. And what our purpose tonight is to kind of take you through and go over what we've been working on for the last 6 months or so, as far as how to reduce our budget for next year. We knew starting in November that, well, we knew when we failed the levy we were going to have trouble. We had already known that ahead of time. We just didn't know the magnitude of trouble we would have because we were anticipating prior to that a decrease in state funding. And that became pretty clear in November. So we want to take you through that tonight. Those of you, there's a lot of new faces in here. Those of you that were at the board meeting last week and some of the other meetings, a lot of what you're going to see is similar. There's not a lot of new stuff to show, but we wanted to try to pull everything together tonight to kind of take you through and show you where we are, and then listen to any comments, concerns, questions, anything of that nature that you have. We are still in the process of pulling everything together to create a district plan for us, a five-year plan that we'll be presenting to the board on June 9th at the board meeting. We have one more forum that's scheduled next month. I believe it's May 16th, that deals with transportation, safety, security, facilities, that type of stuff. That's our final piece to be able to put all of this together. So tonight we'll take you through, show you what we've done, and go from there. We are broadcasting as we've been doing since February. We have video streaming that's happening, so once the presentation's done, I'll probably turn this around a little bit so people that are watching can see the audience there. So to get started with, I mentioned that last November, we knew prior to the campaign, or during the campaign last year, and prior to the election on November, I think it was 8th, that if we failed the levy, we would have roughly $430,000 that we had to cut out of next year, the 11-12 school year's budget. That was a no. Well, at the beginning of November, not only did we fail the levy and fail the levy large, we also got pretty strong word out of Columbus that there was a very good chance that school districts across the state would be cut pretty significantly in state funding for the next biennial budget, which starts on July 1st of this year. For our district, that state funding is roughly 60% of our operating budget. So any type of a decrease that we take from the state is very significant to Waterloo. So at that point, Todd and I, went and talked to a number of other districts. We talked to elected officials. We talked to other representatives down in Columbus that have the insight on this stuff, trying to gain an understanding of what is it that we think could be cut, because we didn't really have any indication. The numbers ran as high as it could be 25%. So we settled on, we felt that 10% of our overall, from where we currently stood with the state to what we could expect, would be a fair number to cut. And we revised the 5-year forecast and presented it to the board at the November board meeting, and they approved it. That took our projected deficit for this next upcoming school year from that $430,000 range up to about $1.2 million. What we then did from there was Todd looked things over and decided we had about $550,000 of that $1.2 million that was encumbrances that we thought we could split up and carry half of those over to the new fiscal year that starts July 1st. So we settled on a number of $950,000 that we needed to reduce prior to the beginning of next year. And so that's where we began. Recently, we found out from the state somewhere around the 3rd week of March that this is what they're projecting for our district as far as the reduction in state funding for next year, fiscal year 12. It equates at the end of the day to a little less than $566,000, which is a little bit over 9%. So we had budgeted for 10%. That's included in that $950,000 figure that we had to cut. And it looks like if these numbers hold, that we will be a little less than what we had anticipated. But it's a big if right now. There's no guarantee that these preliminary numbers that have been shared by the state from the governor will actually hold by the time the state approves this budget by June 30th. These numbers still could change. But if you take a look here, we had taken 10% off of our total amount of money. The way that they came in at these numbers is different than how we came in at the 10%, but at the end of the day, it's very close overall with where things are. But next year, we'll be losing $425,000 in stimulus money. That was the ARRA money that came out a few years ago. Some would argue we should have never budgeted that to be in there on a continual basis. And the response that I think we would give on that is the state of Ohio, and I have a graph I can show you later. The state of Ohio, what they did in the last biennial budget, the last 2 years, so fiscal year 10 and fiscal year 11, they actually reduced our state funding every year, minimally, like 1%, 2%. But that's 60% of the funding that we get from the state. 6% of it last fiscal year 10, was from this stimulus money, and 7% of it this year is from it. So of our 60% from the state, the way that they kept us at 60% was to give us 7%. So 53% came from the state and 7% from stimulus money. But it was all presented as state money because the stimulus money flowed through the state, if that makes sense. So we're taking a hit of $425,000 right off the top for next year. Then this current, the tangible personal property was something that was to be phased out through fiscal year 18, I believe. And they've greatly accelerated it. That's a tax that across the state was assessed to inventory basically of businesses, machines, anything that they had that was part of their business could be taxed. The state decided a while back to phase that out and replace that with what they call the consumer activity tax, called the CAT tax. That never took off as well. It's starting to climb, but it never took off as well. But in the governor's new proposal, what was going to be phased out through fiscal year 18, our purposes here at Waterloo will be completely gone after fiscal year 13, most of which we will take a hit in this upcoming year. And there's two types. There's current and non-current. The non-current's very minimal. This one here, we lose $853 a year over 4 years in what they're projecting. This one we lose $196,000 in the first year, and I think it's 27 or 28 for next year. I'll show you that in a moment. Then this is the other piece of the state support. This is the big line item for schools, the state foundation support. We're actually going up 1% next year, which is just shy of $57,000. When the governor's proposal first came out, and we waited months actually to get this thing. It came out, I think it was March 15th, and they crashed their website where you could download everything. We got it, and then no one knew what it meant. So we spent another 2 weeks or a week waiting for these numbers to come out. But this is what was initially reported. If you saw the newspaper back then, on the Record Courier cover, for example, the first thing they showed the next day after March 15th was education with a red arrow going up, that it had been increased in funding. Well, once all of these pieces started to spill out, because what they did was the governor's office released these on separate spreadsheets. There's like 5 different sheets, none of which is compiled into a total amount. For the following year then, the second year of the biennial budget, we lose that 565 from the year before that we just showed. We lose the rest of our tangible personal property. We lose another 853 on the non-current TPP. And then we actually decreased 2% on the state foundation. So we're down from where we currently stand right now for fiscal year 13 at just $709,000. So that's about 11.5% from where we are. So for the upcoming fiscal year, if these hold, it's a little better than we thought. Not much, but a little. And for the following year, it's a little worse than we thought that it was going to be. So these are the dynamics that we're working with, and why we had to, as we go into this, you'll see why we had to recommend to the board last week to reduce a number of positions that once these numbers finalize, we actually may be able to recall, completely independent of this levy request that's up here in May. It's just the uncertainty because of contractual and state deadlines within the Ohio Revised Code of when we have to meet requirements of notifying teachers for the next school year on when if they're not going to have a contract and when the board has to act. So that kind of puts us in an awkward situation of having to maybe overcut before we know for sure what's going to happen. Because the worst thing that we can do is be in a position where we come back to the board, or I come back to the board and say in June, hey look, they cut us another 10% on the state. We didn't cut deep enough. We don't have the money to pay these people, but we've missed our deadlines to be able to let them off too. So that's kind of where all of this stands. But this is all preliminary. So what have we done since November? So here's that 950,000 that we talked about. And right away after all of this stuff happened in November, we started actually with the second grouping that's listed here at that November meeting, recommended and the board implemented pay to participate for this current year. It started right away with the winter sports season and is currently in place for the spring. And we're projecting those same numbers forward for next year. At this time, there's no plan to increase the pay to participate fees that were board approved in November. Everything that we've done with projections for next year has those numbers staying where they're at. So based off of last year's numbers, we projected that this is what pay to participate would bring in for the rest of this school year, the 27-410, and then for all of next school year when it's in place. Keep in mind as we look at this that these amounts that are coming off of this 950 are really over an 18-month period of time, from November or January of this current year through the end of next school year, 2012. But we have to make all of these prior to basically right now, before the next year begins. But as we look at these savings, this is a recognition of the savings over 18 months. The second thing that happened in December was we made a decision and recommended to the board, and they went along with it, to reduce our bus runs from 2 runs, one K through 5, one 6 through 12, to 1 run, K through 12. The good part of that was when we ran all the scenarios, it was cheaper for us, and actually saved us more money, I should say, to be able to keep service for all of our students rather than cut the state minimum busing. A lot of times we hear districts talk about state minimum, which is only busing students K through 8 and only if they live 2 miles or beyond from the school. We actually, because of the reimbursement we get on transportation, it was a greater cost savings for us to go to 1 bus route and keep it K through 12. So if there was a good thing with that, it was that we were able to keep the same level of service for everybody. It just looked different. Initially, we recommended to the board option 1, it was, I believe, which saved, we didn't add a bus driver. We thought we could do it with the current number of buses that we had. We didn't think we had to put anybody else on the road. But we also knew that there was a chance that once we made this move that we may have to do that. And we had said all along, safety first, but we thought we would try. We quickly found out that we did need to add another bus, and so we finalized that about a month or 2 ago. We added that bus. We actually have another bus that's out there running right now that's got a small group of kids on it, about 35, 40 kids, that we thought we may be able to consolidate onto the other buses when spring sports started, and we just recently have come to the realization that we don't think we're going to be able to do that for the rest of the year. So we adjusted these figures to account for that. Originally it was close to 300, it was about 199,000 on this line and 99,000 here. So you can see that the figures have changed a little bit, but overall it's still a very significant savings for the district. It's a difference of about $16,000 than what we initially thought it would be. At the same time, we got rid of a storage unit that had been part of the district. We had been running down the line since the schools were consolidated onto this campus. We got rid of the stuff that was down there that hadn't been used during that time and got rid of that to save the monthly cost. We eliminated some wireless cards, cell phones that were here within the district. We had a retirement in the treasurer's office, and we went from a full-time person to a part-time person, which recognized a savings over that 18 months of about $51,000. I will give one little asterisk point on that. The majority of that is savings that occurred in benefits, not salary. We don't have somebody that was making $80,000 a year in a full-time job that got cut into 40. That's salary and benefits included. More recently, we just finished negotiations with all three of our unions here. We have three unions. We have the teaching union, WEA. We have our non-certified union, OPSI, and we have a small secretary union. Through those negotiations, we were able to get freezes on the base salary, on their step increased salary, and also we got them all to switch over to one insurance plan that greatly increases the deductible and prescription amount of payments that they have to do. That, and included with that, with our OPSI union, the WEA had increased their percentage of the premiums that they were paying. The last time they negotiated, OPSI hadn't negotiated since. So we got OPSI up to that same percentage amount, that increase in the premium. You know, a lot's made about what the premium payments are, but what we found out through this process here this last year is that we're able as a district to recognize a lot more savings, a lot more significant savings by actually changing how the plan is made up and what the out-of-pocket expenses are for the employees as opposed to what the premium payment is monthly on the So, you know, this was huge. We didn't know where that would come in. We were very fortunate to have our three unions step up and work with us. And it went very well for the type of concessions that were given to be able to do that. We also have been in contact with Chevron, who manages our energy efficiency program that the district went through a few years ago, and asked them if we don't run air conditioning in any of the buildings, what will that save us per year? We were given a ballpark figure of about $18,000. So our plan, other than the server room that's here that needs to have the air cooling the servers for our system, is to not run the air at all. Right now, it's not a big issue. Fast forward a month from now, it'll probably be a huge issue. But this is our plan, as we know it right now, is to not do that, to recognize some savings. We had an unexpected resignation. Tim Fox, who did a fantastic job as our transportation building and grounds supervisor, decided to leave right at the beginning of March. And we hadn't planned on eliminating that job, but when he left us, we thought that we would take some time to step back and really look at, do we need to have a full-time person in that position? Can we provide a part-time position? So we have not filled that position right now. This dollar amount that you see here is a combination of two things. It's the salary that we're saving on him for the second half of his contract that would have ended on July or June 30th. And what we're anticipating that we will probably hire a part-time person into that position at some point in the summer. And looking things over, I believe we could probably get by with part-time as opposed to full-time, so that's most likely what we would do. But that's a combination. His position paid is about $50,000 is what that position had paid. So about 22 of this is what was left for his current contract that we're not filling. And we're estimating part-time somewhere in the $20,000 range with the person we hired. This preschool unit, We've been working with the County Education Service Center to add a preschool unit here at Waterloo. So the way that preschool works, if a student has an identified learning disability as early as age 3, our district, according to Ohio law, is responsible for educating that child. So currently we have a number of preschool students that we bus to other places like Field, Woodstown, and Southeast. So we talked to the county about, could we do a unit here through the county? The county's responsible for the teachers, for the licensing, all of that. The county takes off of our bill that we pay them for other services, $6,000 for letting them use our space. On top of that, and that's not factored in here, we'll also save on transportation. They've assured us that the students that we will have here, they will get all of our special learning needs students back here to Waterloo, so we're not busing them for the other students going to preschool. So there'll be a savings in that regards also, just not exactly sure what that will be yet. This reallocation of building budgets, we're the beneficiary, I guess, of a recent bill that just moved through and was signed by the governor. I think it was House Bill 30, which kind of repealed a lot of the mandates that came down through House Bill 1 under Governor Strickland. And part of that bill, districts were required to set aside a certain percentage of money for supplies. They were called set-asides. And you didn't have a choice, you had to do it. And with that bill, what they've done is eliminate that set-aside for districts. So we were able to, we used a lot of our money went into the building budgets for supplies. So when we found out that this was going to happen, we asked the principals what they thought they could get back for the current school year. And that totaled between the 3 buildings, $42,000. And then we've taken that amount out of their budgets for next year, so their budgets will be reduced accordingly. So that's where this $84,000 comes from. So we've gone from the $950,000 to where we currently stand right now is $81,763 left to get us to zero. And we've done this without having to touch personnel or programming, which is what we consider to be the core here for our students. And so, we feel pretty good about this. There's a lot of things that have taken place here, a lot of people that have worked hard to come together to make these things happen, but we're not all the way there yet. We do have some other things that we're working on. The first, that obviously is what I showed you to begin with. We need those state numbers to finally stabilize and be approved, so we know where that's at. So much of what we're going to have to do is dependent on whether or not those numbers that have been released actually stand once this budget's approved. Medicaid reimbursement, we recommended and the board agreed a few months ago to enter into an agreement with a place called Ohio Alliance Billing. There's certain students that have certain learning needs are eligible for the district to get reimbursement on those through Medicaid. It's stuff that we're already doing, people we already have, but what we have to do is file and go through a process with that. So we partner with Ohio Alliance Billing. They take care of doing all of the processing and working on it and resubmitting to get this reimbursement for us. And we benefit from that. They've given us estimates, and the reason that this is not in our slide before where it's a definite number yet is we're still working on it. They estimated initially that we could, as a district, potentially gain about $50,000 a year through Medicaid reimbursement. That was based off of our percentage of special education students, free and reduced lunch students, and just overall student population. We now have gotten it to the point where we know who's eligible. We're trying to get parental permission to be able to do the billing to see if the services that they have are indeed services that will get reimbursed for. So we should have a pretty definitive number that we can plug in there pretty soon. Online school, We last fall sent out a survey. We have about 200 students. They get represented by 74 families, if I remember right, that choose to send their students somewhere else, whether it's a community school, which are known as charter schools commonly here in Ohio, whether it's homeschooling, whether it's open enrollment to other districts. So we sent out a survey back in the fall, trying to get a sense from those families on, why do you choose to do that? What is it that Waterloo could do better? And we got, I think it was 12 surveys returned, so not a lot. But the little bit that we got showed that the responses were kind of all over the board. Some of it was academic related, some of it was religious belief related, a couple of them listed safety factors in it. So we started to look at what could we do to attract students back. And we have a pretty heavy population of students that are part of online learning community schools, charter schools. And we have a pretty large number of students that are homeschooled. And it's our belief that if we can find the medium to do it the right way and offer a Waterloo diploma to those students when they get done with curriculum, that if we create our own online virtual academy, that we may be able to attract a number of those students back here. And in return, what that does for us is that allows us to keep the money. This money we never actually see. It's part of what the state shows we get, but it's all done through an electronic system where they deduct it and send it to the school the kid goes to. So for every kid that we're able to attract back and keep here, that's about $5,700 that our district keeps. So we're in the process. I have originally taken a place out of Pennsylvania that we were looking to work with to the board last month, and I pulled it at the last moment because became aware of another place around here that actually would give a higher percentage yield to the district financially. So we're taking a look at that. Our intent is to go back to the board in May with a recommendation for who to partner with to do it. And why do we need to partner? We need to partner with somebody because we do not have the finances right now to do this on our own, teachers that are required to do it. For the little bit that it costs us to partner with somebody, we would never be able to do that on our own. Our goal would be that once we get this up and running, that we would love to eventually make this our own thing so that all the money stays with us. But that's kind of our plan as we grow. But initially, we want to make sure that not only are we getting a good financial return, but we want to make sure that if we're getting a Waterloo diploma, that first and foremost what we're offering is top quality. And so we're in the process of evaluating all of that, but that'll be a component of what we do. Attrition, just like I showed you with that transportation job, you have unexpected resignations, retirements, all of that stuff impacts the bottom line. So, we don't know what the future will hold with that, but that's something that will impact where we stand. Reduction in positions, I'll get to that in a moment. I want to kind of walk you through what we went through to decide which positions to recommend to the board that the board acted upon last week, and kind of give you an update on where that stands. Because that to be able to get down to where we need to be, there's going to have to be some combination of a reduction in positions, unfortunately. We don't think we can completely eliminate what we need to and not have to touch personnel programming. But we're hoping to minimize that impact. Yeah, there's another thing that we looked at, and I don't have it up here because financially it's not going to change what currently is done. But there's a lot of talk that people have suggested, people have asked. You have a lot of special education students that you send to other districts outside of the whole preschool thing we've already talked about. So one of the first things that we did back in November was to take a look at what we're paying to the county for these different programs before we send the students, and to do a cost analysis to see if we brought those students back here and offered those programs here that we currently don't have, would we actually save money? And the answer right now is no. Does that mean that will change somewhere down the road? Possibly. Maybe the more students that you have that are part of those programs, the less savings you recognize by being part of a consortium model like that. But as it stands right now, that's not a place that we feel we could save money for the time being. So I want to get into the staffing stuff then, to kind of give you an overview of how this stuff gets decided. And I guess this probably falls under the category of for what it's worth. But just so you have an understanding of how we go about doing this, it's not just kind of randomly selected, here's what we'll do, here's what we'll do. There's a method to the madness. So when we take a look at this, we have to break down our enrollment projections into two different categories: regular education students and special education. Not because we want to, but all of these decisions are based off of the Ohio Revised Code and state minimum standards. And the state minimum standards are set on regular education students are one set of standards, and special education students are another as far as ratios go. So we're projecting next year 988 students physically here on the campus, regular education students, not total population. Okay, this 80 for kindergarten right now may be a little high. I think we're at 59 that have been tested here the last 2 days with the kindergarten screening. We typically pick up 10 to 15 more. So that number may end up being a little high when it's all said and done in August. Special education student-wise, another 135 students. So the state minimums, what we have to look at as our guiding principles as we determine where our staffing might be. For intervention specialists, which are the teachers that work with special education students primarily, they can have a maximum caseload of 16 to 1. That's students that they're responsible for writing the IEP for, K through 8. And 9 through 12, it's 24 to 1. In any given instructional period, so 40, 42, 45-minute block of time, K through 8, they can have a 12 to 1 ratio, 9 through 12 at 16 to 1. And the last piece for this special education minimum standards is that the age range in any instructional period can't exceed 60 months. So you can't have kids that are more than 5 years apart from each other that are part of one class time. As far as regular education goes, there's two ratios, they're both 25 to 1. K through 4, and then district-wide. So I'll show you, this is the other part here of the state minimums, and it's presented here as one thing. This is how the Ohio Revised Code or Administrative Code reads, but it's actually two pieces that are within here. The first part is you have to have 5 full-time equivalents in this 8 categories. Okay, so outside of the rest of this, you have to have 5 full-time people in some combination between these. The second part is you have to have 5 of these 8 areas covered. Okay. So that, and the last part that becomes important for a couple slides from now is elementary is defined as K through 8. And part of this 5 of 8 is elementary art, elementary music, and elementary PE. So currently, here's our breakdown of teachers. With the special education, we also have tutors. I'll talk a little bit more about those later. For the purposes of these ratios, we are not allowed to include those tutors into calculating those. They're part-time people. Regular education, core subject-wise, here's our breakdown per building. And then regular education in the special classes or things that are seen as kind of electives, PE, music, gym. There's the breakdown as far as the teachers go. And I point this out when I'm on this slide so I don't have to go back. This 9 for high school with the specials will get calculated in with this to a later thing I'll show you. But elementary and middle school won't, because it goes back to that 5 of 8 that we just showed you. These people are considered a separate party. They don't get calculated into the ratios. They're part of that whole 5 of 8 deal that we have to have. We also have title tutors. And again, these can't be calculated into our ratios for the purposes of what we're doing. These tutors come out of federal funding. The title is out of Title I funds, and the special ed ones that are listed here come out of Title 6B funding. So if we take our current number of teachers, and this is regular education, and we break that into the number of students we're projecting for next year, You can see here that if we kept our current number of core teachers, K through 4, we're about 22 to 1. So this is telling us, based on the state minimums, we could cut to 2 teachers and get to 15 to 1, or I'm sorry, 15 teachers to be at a 25 to 1 ratio. On the K through 12 front, it's showing we could actually cut 14. But this is where I want to, I guess, add an editorial in. This is where I think it gets a little deceiving, because part of that 54 are those 9 special teachers in the high school that are not the core teachers. And quite honestly, if we got down this low, we may be on paper, because of how they calculate ratios, showing 25 to 1. But the actual class size of what it actually would look like on a given period in a given teacher's classroom, you're probably 35, 40 kids. So there's a big difference between student and teacher ratios and how, because of how those are calculated and what that actually looks like for a class size in any given period of time. It's very deceiving, but it is very different. The other factors that we have to consider when we look at all of this are the proper licensure and certification and highly qualified status. Part of what came into play with No Child Left Behind back in 2001 or 2 was this whole, what they call HQT. Teachers have to be highly qualified to teach the area that they're in. And so we have to look at all of that as we decide where these cuts are that we're going to potentially make. Those are the factors that get taken into consideration. So we put out a list back in March. We had to give notification to the union. The union had to receive notification 30 days prior to the teachers when they would receive it. The teachers, according to contract, have to receive it by April 30th. But because our Board of Education meeting was April 14th, we had a backup from that date just to make sure we had ourselves covered. So we put this out in the letter that most of you probably saw. These are the positions that we planned on eliminating, and we kind of broke this down into some different percentages. If we got cut at that 10% state level, we were probably cutting no lower than consumer science. So consumer science up is kind of equated with the 10% cuts. This industrial arts down, with the exception of technology coordinator, that's kind of its own thing. That's not in any particular order here. But it's a teaching position, so it's on the list here. This industrial arts down is kind of our 20% level. If we got cut the additional 10%, that was roughly $606,000 for us more that we would have to cut out. And so we came up with that 20% range because in talking to Todd McKinney, our state elected rep here, and talking to other people in Columbus, we settled on, even though we had budgeted for 10 and felt pretty confident in 10, we wanted to make sure that we reduced at a level that we thought would be the worst case scenario. And I mentioned earlier, the worst we ever heard was 25%. We were assured by Todd McKinney that he didn't think that was going to get anywhere near 25%. So 20% is where we decided needed to be our level just to be safe. And so that's what we did. And you can see here that a lot of these positions that are on here are positions that are part of those 9 at the high school that are those elective type classes, those special classes. And the reason is not that we don't like those, because those are great programs for our kids. We don't want to see any of this go. But to go back to how you do those ratios, this is where we have the ability to be able to make those movements based upon the state minimum standards that we have to stick to.
Are there any of those that are needed for a student to get into college, like high school graphic arts? Do they have to have that to get into college?
No, none of these are anything that somebody would need to graduate from here or to get into college. Now that doesn't mean that there's not things on here that would be very helpful for somebody trying to get in. But this should not put anybody in.
Can they pick them up somewhere, like online or?
Yeah, we'll come back to that. So then we also put out a number of supplemental positions and some extended time stuff that we thought that we could reduce if needed. We've been trying to take a balanced approach to this. I mean, we've looked at all of these different areas, tried to turn over every area of operation here in the district with how we do this. We've held multiple forum meetings to get public and community input on where to look. And, so we've tried to take a balanced approach. Some would say, why don't you just cut all the supplementals out to begin with? And this type of thing is important for kids. There's a balance there with everything in the school setting. And so we try to approach that balance accordingly. So our 10% line on this was roughly right about chest club up. And the other ones were ones we were looking at if we got cut people. The other thing that we had to do right now was reduce or suspend the contracts for next year currently for our tutors. This is kind of a separate issue. Our tutors are paid through federal money, and we do not know where the federal budget is going to end up either. I was just reading this past weekend that they may not even know until November. So we will find out from the state what they're anticipating us to receive in July. Part of this is not different. Every year, these resource room tutor positions, for that exact reason, usually they're not renewed. This year we went through a reduction in staff instead, kind of a different approach with the same result. And then they're called back each year once we find out what our money is. We did that though with title this year, and that's happened in the past with title before too, just not in the recent past. Probably about 7 years ago was the last time title positions were non-renewed and then brought back when we found out what funding was. So in some ways, this piece isn't different than what's typically done each year. In some ways, it is. But we will not, our hope for this is that once we find out what that federal funding is, we'll be able to recall these people to their positions for next year. That's what we want to be able to do. But these 13 positions, which are part-time positions, are completely dependent on federal money. This has nothing to do with the state, like the other teaching positions and supplementals and all that you just saw that I listed too. We had some extended time reductions. We have some people that do extended time for things that they need to do, mostly the counselors, because of the work that's required with getting the transcripts out and other things once the year ends. Before I get into that, I wanted to say a couple words about this. So the board acted upon these recommendations last week because they had to. That was the time frame that we were on. Our hope, if we go back here to where this money stands right now, our hope is that if we can get some of these other things to materialize, if the state budget holds to where we think it's going to where it's being at least told to us right now it's going to stay, we're hoping that we'll be able to recall the majority of these positions. We think right now as it stands, we won't get any lower than consumer science. And quite honestly, there's probably a good chance that if some of these things come through, we may be able to bring consumer science back too. And so the way that at the top of this list, until you get to consumer science, we're not losing anything in the core subject area or program-wise for the students. There's people that will move, for example, the lady that's the media specialist because of her seniority will move into the English classroom, which will cost somebody a job that currently has that's lower on the seniority. Okay, but we still have the English that's offered for the kids. It's not till we get to this point that we're now taking away programming that's available for the students and not being able to have it. So our hope is that once all of this stuff finalizes, that we're able to recall the majority of these positions. We think that we may be able to get it to the point where at the end of the day, some of these positions will be lost through attrition. But as far as people and jobs go, it could be that we go from 25 people that got reduced the other night to maybe 2 that don't have a job once next year starts. And then, you know, if we can do that from starting at almost $1 million with what we had cut and be able to minimize the impact on the core for our students, and we think that that's pretty good. You know, that's we were hoping to be able to do all along. The other thing I want to address here before I turn it over, and we'll stay as long as we need to tonight to take questions, answer anything that you have. I want to make a mention about this levy. So we do have this levy that's on in a couple weeks, less than 2 weeks. 4.76 mils for 5 years. That's the length of it. It's an emergency levy. How did we come up with that? Well, as you're aware, we have the 8 mil continuing, so forever, on in November. And after that got soundly defeated, we took time to step back and listen. We held 2 public forums on financial options, one in December, one in January. We had about 130 people total between the 2 that showed up. And we presented about 7 different options that the Board of Education could consider to put on the ballot. From the operating continuing, like was on back in November, to millage and dollar amount incremental levies, to income taxes that could be put on, to emergency levies. And we were told over and over again, while we didn't get a lot of feedback on what type to put on, I was hoping to get some strong input on, you know, should we put on an income tax? We didn't really get that kind of feedback, but the feedback that came through loud and clear at those meetings was, make it as small as possible for as short period of time as possible. And so when we went back and Todd crunched the numbers, what we did was we took the 5-year forecast, we eliminated that $950,000, not only for next year, but every year moving forward. So the stuff that we do to reduce $950,000, or that money that we bring in to help offset that, has to continue every year now from here to eternity with this district, because that's budgeted in for her. We then took and plugged in the smallest millage rate that we could that would buy an additional year. So we get through next school year, the 11-12 year, because of the cuts and the other things that have been done to offset that $950,000. If this passes in May, this will get us through the 12-13 school year, which to many may seem kind of crazy to go back and ask for something that's going to last for such a short period of time. But we really felt, after listening to the community and looking at it, and we knew to begin with, I mean, the school board, myself, Todd, none of us are oblivious to what's going on in the world around us and the community around us. We really felt that, you know, this is what we need to do. I guess we just need to start buying year by year. And maybe over the course of these 2 years, if we're fortunate to get 2 years, we'll be able to have some turning in the economy. Maybe people will start to get back to work. We can be very optimistic and maybe think the state will change the way that they fund schools, you know, which has been found unconstitutional many times. And so you just never know what could change over the course of a few years' time. So that's why we recommended that to the board. That's what's up. And on May 3rd. What does that mean? A $100,000 property valuation, that's about $12.15 a month. Back in the fall when we had the other one on, I think it was about $20 a month. So we almost cut it in half, the amount that's being requested of the voters to get us through. If we don't pass that, I think we're looking at, with all of these numbers factored in there, what's in it, somewhere around $800,000 or so, Tom. $727,000 that we're going to have to cut for the 12-13 school year. And I'll tell you, when we go back...
You realize that's why everybody's upset.
Yeah.
Well, you went from a 9 mil levy to a 4 mil levy, basically. You just asked for a handout.
The first time?
Yes.
Well,
If you'd have done this from the beginning, you got your levy passed.
and that, you know, when we hear that kind of a comment, Yeah, I would say that with these things that have been done, some of this stuff is pretty controversial amongst the community members. There's a lot of people that feel that, you know, when the district moved, and I can only speak on the historical piece that I know from what I've been told and what I've looked into, because I wasn't here. But with the busing, for example, when we combined onto this campus, there was a decision that was made. They went from 3 bus routes to 2 instead of 1, because they didn't want to combine students of such a wide age level onto the buses like that and pay to participate. You know, the district back in the 90s, I think it was the late 90s, had paid to participate in the place for a little while, a few years, I think it was 3, and then did away with that because it wasn't a popular thing. It was there, so
I understand that. What they
you're
think it was a
saying.
message though, because 90% of the people in this community pay to participate. It actually costs them more money, costs me more money for my kids to pay to participate than what it would have if I'd have passed your levy. It actually costs me more. The difference is I'm not going to give it away to you anymore. If you want to earn it, which you're doing, you're making your cuts, but I'm not just going to give it to you blindly.
And that's fine, and that's what.
That's what this amounted to. It was holding you accountable like the rest of the world is.
Sure. That's good. You know, we're you know, doing what we can to address the issues. We're looking at every.
I'm with you. I
aspect of
applaud you
operation.
now because you guys are actually working towards saving money. But you weren't working for it before you asked for the 9 mil levy.
Well, and I think, to be fair to what had been done before, with respect to what you're saying, there, and I don't have that list here, that's a list which you can find on the levy fact sheet, and I don't have it memorized, but there are a number of things over the course of time in the last 5 or 6 years, I believe, on that fact sheet there, that first page there.
Is
There
that
was
what this
provision.
past and present 25 bullets are in a 5-year period? Because that's not disclosed on here, and that's frustrating. I'll be
That
honest.
one slide that shows the expenditure of the revenue.
Yeah, I have
on
that.
it.
Let me switch over to that. This.
You know, just going forward, public board has, like I said, over the years, and has tried not to go into deficit spending. Since back, I just have it back to
96.
96, but you can see how the expenditure, where it's adjusted the expenditures over the years through attrition, through other things that have kept us, try to keep us in line with the revenues that we have come with.
I remember I was a little amazed that some of the slides that you guys provided, it looked like the expenses were increasing when in reality, in fact, the expenses were not increasing. Your funding was decreasing, definitely sufficient, but it was odd the way you presented it, which, I mean, so it kind of misleading, but it wasn't incorrect, it was kind of.
I'm not trying to beat you up.
No, you're right.
You're on the right track right now.
No, you're fine.
The only other question I got, if you go back to
I have
who
to
you're
switch back
cutting
over.
or projected cuts as far as teachers go.
Yes.
Right. Here's my only question on this.
Sure.
Yes, all your staffing as far as teachers in there, but you don't have all your staffing as far as nurses, secretaries, accountants, custodial help, whatever it is. That's what I'd like to see, because this is a school system. The whole key here is school teachers. Not to beat up on the school teachers, we don't want to reduce, nobody wants to reduce any staffing anywhere. It's hard to do to anybody to lay them off, cut their job. I would think the first thing we would do is go after non-school staffing as far as teaching. You go after custodial, you go after, not that it makes it any better or any easier to lay somebody off. Secretaries. I don't see any of that up there. I can't believe we would cut that many teachers, tutors, whatever, but I don't see you cutting a secretary here, or maybe a custodian here, or, when I went to this school, it was basically the same amount of people here. We had one janitor per school. The teachers actually, and this is, I mean, not that you want to cut a custodian, but, I mean, somebody's got to get cut. Would you rather be a custodian or a teacher? Who's to say that the teacher, instead of the custodian sweeping the classrooms, that the teacher sweeps the classroom every night? Takes them 10 minutes extra to sweep the classroom, rather than losing a teacher job. They sweep the classroom, the custodian does the main hallways. Did we look at cutting custodians? I don't know how many's on staff.
No, we
I don't even know where you even find how many custodians, nurses, secretaries, all this stuff. We can see the teachers, but I don't see the non-teaching staff.
We,
Do you see that
Support,
anywhere?
is your support personnel. No, I haven't seen any of that.
those, first of all, that information is not there, and I can get that for you. I'll get you before you get it. It's on, it was on some other presentations that I've done when we talked about, when we the last one meeting that we had there last month, dealt with personnel. And so I had slides that showed a breakdown of how many teachers, how many tutors, how many secretaries, all of those type of custodians, all of those type of things. Secondly, we are looking at all of those areas. We have deadlines to meet with different unions that aren't there with others, first of all. Second of all, in taking a look at what we need within each of these areas, you know, we've tried to trim down. We've got a couple of 8 positions this year for attrition that we've been able to do. There's been other cuts that have been done in the past within the custodial area, bus driver rides, for example. We don't have any movement we can make on that, and we ultimately have a couple of hours. So we are looking at that stuff. It's not that that stuff hasn't been looked at. There was a belief, for example, with custodians, with Mr. Fox before he left, that he felt we were down to, we couldn't make any cuts in that area because of the other cuts that had taken place over the course of time. So we are trying to take a balanced approach and a balanced look at that stuff. Some of those areas have been addressed in previous years.
I just like to follow up that through attrition over the course of years, we did not replace 2 custodians. And back in 1998, when the board had a state auditor's office to do a performance audit of the district, the state looked at all those other areas, our non-support staff people, and their conclusion was that our current custodial makeup is understaffed compared to peer districts around the state. So we reduced 2 custodians from what we had, and when the state committee did their performance audit, again, they deemed that what we had, they considered as understaffed, the square footage that we have compared to other districts. So those areas were looked at. However, the state came back and said, we don't have any recommendations for you in that area because we already feel that you're not overly staffed in those areas.
So we are looking at all of these different areas. And if I get your input before we go, before I leave, I'll send you those other slides. They're all on my website.
All right.
But I can make sure I get that to you. Which reminds me, if you didn't on your way in, if you want on your way out, we have signature sheets with email. Can add you to our email address list that we send out information regularly to. And there's also, if you're interested, yard signs, you write down your name and address so we can make sure it's signed to pick up afterwards if you're interested. But you know, we're at the point here where we listen to any questions, anything else that you have. The only thing I ask tonight is be respectful of others as they talk, and we'll take time to listen to every last thing that needs to be said. With personnel, I said this last month and I'll say it again, while we can talk in generalities about these things, this is not a forum to talk about any individual people. And so if we were to get down that road for some reason, that's something that I would put a stop to too. Not that we can't discuss that one-on-one, but that's not something for this type of forum. So that's pretty much it. I'm willing to,
I said, one of the items up there that you're talking about to have some, cost because air conditioning is full.
yes.
I mean, I didn't go to school here, so I don't know how they're doing that. But my kids do go, all my kids do. And, is it gonna be, especially the teachers, like Mrs. Arwood got from my kids go. I mean, are these teachers gonna be able to functionally teach a group of kids in a schoolroom without air conditioning?
We think so.
There's
so the way that this system is set up, I've learned a little bit about this. First I will say, I've been in, I guess it's four different school systems now. And this is the first that there's been. So, personally for me, it's upsetting that I can't do it. But outside of that, outside of that, we looked into this. There's actually a blower system that will still operate. It just won't turn the chillers on. So there will be movement of air going through the classroom. And I will also say this: we're going to operate on the principle of common sense. So if we realize that this is just not working, then we will go back and revise accordingly. And we're not going to put anybody's safety in jeopardy to save some money. We've been trying to use that as a principle with all of this stuff. The building, transportation, and grounds position kind of assume those duties right now. And one of my fears is that there's just some things that are not smart, and some of those are those areas. And I don't want to think we're saving the district some money and end up losing more in the long run because we have to bring people in to do different things that could have been done if we had somebody there to do it. So we're trying to use that as the principles of things. And we're not afraid to go back and revise if we need to, like we did with the bus. We'll go here and open back.
Me?
Yeah.
I just wanted to commend you guys first for doing such a nice job.
Thank you.
You really worked at it. My big fear is how we're gonna get it out to the public and educate, especially the older people that don't have kids here anymore, because they're the hardest ones to sell on this. How we're gonna get them educated to pass the levy.
Do you have any suggestions? We've been trying to, communication I think is a funny thing, because no matter how much you do and how many different mediums you try, it's never
Well,
enough.
Rick Hoop has a big smile, and I think he gets it.
Okay.
Oh!
I didn't hear, right? It's amazing to me, that's before every meeting I've been to, I've been to all these meetings and all the board meetings. Got 900 some school districts, kids in school. I don't believe you, parents, you don't show up to these meetings, the school board meetings, you're not gonna pass a letter. Sorry to say it.
We've been trying to do everything we can to communicate within the budget that we have, which is very minimal for doing that. We have been fortunate that the Record Courier Alliance Review has covered a lot of what's been going on here and presented, the factual information as they see it, which I would hope has helped to get the information out to the public. But we're always looking for new ways. We're going to be starting a district Facebook page here pretty soon to try to reach a different age group of people and a different population, and Twitter and some other things that we can do for free that some people think may help us with other things. So, but if there's any ideas that you or anybody else have, we would be greatly appreciative to hear those. Rick?
Couple questions. I like, all the board meetings I've attended and all the superintendents, going back to my kids were there, I think you've probably done the most outstanding job.
I'll fall back.
Mr. Hill will not be here too long because I think the word's already out on what he's done already here at Waterloo. And the past superintendents we've had, never took the initiative to get back. And we used to have 2 principals in the school system. I could never understand lessons was voted in by the teachers union on tenure, on leading students, where they took the responsibility away from the teacher. I could go on, we had a guy that used to be a principal, and they put him, when Mr. Wolf is there, doing his job as some kind of a coordinator, paid him 65 or 70,000. He is no longer here. And that thing that you passed out, that job was eliminated. So it was that salary plus the other. The question I have, is it required by the state of Ohio for a master's degree for a teacher in the state of Ohio?
Is it required? Yeah, I believe it is. I think when all of those licensed, I know the teachers that are in there that really jumped in. When they made changes to licensure back around the turn of this, around 2000, 2001, and they moved from certification to licensure, I believe that at that point, they required that after, if you got a license after such a period of time, that you had so many years to get a master's degree, that was something that was now required. And to my knowledge, that has not gone away. Does anybody know more about that?
If you graduate after 2005 or later, you're required to have a master's degree. And you highly qualified in those districts. People who were licensed prior to that, the way their licensure was done, they may not be considered highly qualified because you know that's for that educational purposes. Some districts don't require teachers to be highly qualified, but many districts do. And they're also, we're also required to go through education.
So that pays the person who goes to the master. I thought everybody had to do that. He pays $5,000 to $6,000 more per year. And do we still honor that? Sorry? If a person gets a master's and comes back while they're here, and I certificate to have a master's degree? Yes. I told the things I've listened to that the people just taking it said they don't even monitor it, or you don't have to go get it.
I can look into that.
Costs each school system, that kind of money.
My understanding is that was part, and I want to say that may even have tied back to No Child Left Behind. But I don't think that, I mean, so many of these things have changed. There was this whole House Bill 1 I mentioned before, was this sweeping reform that came in with Governor Strickland 2 years ago, in the middle of his second biennium. And the first thing that this new administration did was pass House Bill 30, which repealed so many pieces of that. So it's hard to keep straight what is and what isn't. But I know for a fact that at some point it was, and I do not believe I've ever heard it's not left, it's
I
no
have
longer
heard that
required.
it is going to be phased out, but a lot of that has to do with what happens within the child welfare legislation, what permits that are keeping.
I will follow up to that. I failed to mention here,
One
anything
thing
that
with
we don't
teacher
have an
salaries
answer
was
to.
on that paper, everything that you guys had, just our main teacher, our teacher water was like, when you look at districts, what districts say, water is not, it's one of the lowest. And you have to try to keep that in mind when you're out there. Teaching jobs are slim, obviously, all the districts are cutting, so sometimes teachers are taking jobs, whether, it's the lowest paying district or not, it's just happy to have a job. But you want to keep that in consideration too, you don't want to have teachers who come in for the first couple of years of their teaching career and then leave because once they get their master's, you're not willing to pay for a teacher with more qualifications, or you're not willing
Say
to
something
keep
about
on someone who has experience.
Where did I look back on the contract that we honor here, I think all schools do that, on the step rate. Does the union negotiate that into the school board, or how did that get put in? Plus, they get a back in the years, we used to get 3% raises for a period of 3 years. Now, the agreement you settled on the other night when you went into executive session, everybody left. Was that for 1 year?
It's only 1 year, and it's only 1 year because that's all we can certify because of our financial situation. We can't enter into an agreement that's any longer.
Do you have any recollection, what is this thing called separate? It was a real dark secret, nobody knew about, but they were still getting, if you went from the 12th year teaching to the 13th, there was a certain percentage increase that you got, that nobody, I never knew about it.
Yeah, I don't know, you know what, one second, Tom, I don't have an answer on the history of where step raises came from. The only thing I can tell you is that step raises are something that's consistent across the state, and I would guess probably across the nation when you talk about teaching. I don't know when the inception of it was here, but I know it's not anything that is unique to Waterloo. Tom?
I've been here for 32 years, and those raises were everyone's fault. It's not something new.
Do you have a question?
I was just wondering, the current tangible personal property, can that be spread out more than just the next 2 years, or that is?
That's what the governor has proposed. Now, all of that's up in the air, right? If you've been following at all what's going on with the budget proposal, they've said that it has the most policy that's been incorporated into a budget that we've ever seen. They've cut very affluent districts that probably have a very Republican strong foundation, very significantly more than they've cut districts like Waterloo. Even though this is very significant for us, there's districts that are getting absolutely hammered with where their numbers are coming in. And so there's some fear that those districts may have some clout to lobby and try to get these numbers changed. There's, I think it was $253 million that he's got built into the budget that is based upon the federal government giving interest relief on some money that the state owes the federal government, and there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. Plus, he's been pretty critical of relying on the government for money anyway, so it's kind of surprising that he built something like that into his budget. But there's a lot of pieces that have yet to be played out, and there may be movement. That's why we can't feel comfortable with where we're at now, because God only knows where all of this stuff will end up at the end of the day when it's all said and done. So we don't have any, that's something that people are probably lobbying for. There's something that we don't get hit with, that places that have big energy companies that are in their district do. It's another form of tax that was supposed to be paid out over a long period of time, that they're drastically cutting that down. So,
Can you tell me on this personal property tax you're talking about? Because from my perspective, I stopped doing personal property tax insurance not 1 or 2 years ago.
yeah,
It was like a slush fund?
yeah, well, they were phasing it out. They were taking this consumer activity money,
Yeah.
putting and then using that to offset. And the school districts were, I believe, and I could be mistaken on this, but I think the school districts were the group that was getting phased out over the longest period of time. I think everybody else was getting phased out this current fiscal year. And what they would do is, whatever the cap tax didn't offset, they would transfer money from the general state operating fund to cover that amount that they promised to the schools. That's how it was set up.
Yeah, because when the commercial activity tax came in, what got phased out was the corporate state tax and also the personal property tax. Those two things got phased out and tax tax came in.
I believe it was back in 2004 when they still had the personal property tax. The highest collection that we received was about just a little over $400,000 a year. And then they came out phasing that out. We were supposed to be held harmless from fiscal year 10. And then the remainder of that was supposed to be phased out through fiscal year 18. So we have pretty much been held harmless up through fiscal year 10. We were slated to get $224,000 this year, and then that being phased out in 2018. And what's happening is they're taking most of that away from us this year, we get a little bit next year, and then nothing. So the money we're counting on to take us to fiscal year 2018, let alone what we're losing now, they just completely blow out.
So you're saying as they phase out those two programs, those two tax programs, they give the tax getting no funding? That's correct. And they're getting more tax out of that?
Well, I don't know what they're getting out of this. From what I heard,
Tax out of people, the cat tax, and they were.
The cat is starting to pick up, but it's never, I don't believe it's ever been, and I think maybe just recently it finally exceeded a quarter projection, but it's never done that before. It's always been under where they thought it would be.
when they first touted that cat tax was going to replace what we're losing in personal hands property. Even back then, they were saying, it's underfunded, you know, you can't do it, it's not. That's what makes it so difficult. So I thought about this whole time, that the state gives us these numbers, and tells us we're getting these things. Yes, we're guaranteeing you these funds, we're giving you this, we're giving you that. So, you know, we plan for it, we budget for it, we plan accordingly, and then just out of the blue, a new governor takes office, and what you were promised, they take away from you. Just makes it very frustrating. And it makes us look like us in the board, like we don't know, you know, what we're doing. But in all reality, you know, we work with the numbers we have, and those numbers change at a heartbeat, and we have to adjust accordingly and step back and see where we're at and reprioritize what the needs are for the district.
We can't control the funding again. That's unfortunate. Good.
I was just gonna say, I've been to a couple of these meetings, and I really truly believe that a school system is built on a community, and with 25, we have less than 25 people here. And I don't see our school system, surviving years to come without a community. And I don't see our children's future surviving without us as parents and without the community. So in order for our school system to survive and the levy to pass and what needs to be done, getting done, I think we all kind of need to get together as a community and get the word out, because I hear all the time when I talk to people, yes, there needs to be more community involvement, yes, there needs to be more community involvement, but somehow all these people never show up and they never get involved. So my question is, where is everybody? And how do we get these people? You know, we were at
Well, it's going to be word of mouth. You do have to take into account, you know, I haven't been to a single meeting, but I've watched every single meeting online. And I do have to thank you for that, because we all have kids in the school. We've all got lives outside of here that you can't be here. But I can sit at home at 10 p.m. and watch it if that's my thing to do. We have to use Facebook. We have to talk about it. We have to just get those numbers out there. Just because we're not sitting here doesn't mean we don't care.
No, I agree.
That's all. It just, we have to just keep talking. And
No, I agree, we need to talk it, but we also need to show our support. Like the other night, my husband and I went to the art auction. That was the most disappointing thing I've ever been to in my life at Waterloo School System. The most disappointing thing I've ever been to. Why? Because I bought 7 other kids' projects, not my own, 7 other kids. Why? Because they were standing up there. One little girl was crying because no one was bidding on her stuff. Why should that happen at Waterloo School? Why? The whole night, what did it cost me? What did it cost me? Maybe 1 meal out for my family. Was it worth it? It was more than worth it. The pieces were beautiful. Where am I going to put them? I'm going to put them in my house. But where was the community? They were sitting there. One little kid, he's standing out there, his stuff's $2, and he's just standing there, and nobody's bidding. Nobody's bidding. Why? My question is why? What did it cost people? I was so disappointed in my community. I could have just, I don't know what to say. That was sad for me. That was sad. It broke my heart. Not for me, for those kids standing up there.
I talked to the news reporter covering the board meeting, and I said, you at the board meeting? I always went to a board meeting, and I asked, this is a question in practice, what's the most important thing in your life after you got married? Is there, in my situation, my 3 kids, that's to me the most valuable thing, probably more important, I would say more important than my mom and dad at that time, those are my kids. And it just irks me. I cannot believe that people, like you just said this, I've been to all these meetings, all through. A couple times I went to board meetings back when 3 superintendents ago. We were here. There was like 4 people in the audience, plus a board member representing the youth. That was all there. I looked around. Is this the way it's going to be when all my kids go through? We were facing the same thing I saw back then. You just absolutely amazing that we are so busy in our life. And he's done he begged for the same like he did on me.
It's okay to be busy, but I don't want to see some little kid up there with,
I went through the same
with
thing.
nobody
same
getting
thing
on
you
the
did.
poor kid's stuff. That breaks my heart.
I'm not trying to defend parents for not coming in or everything, but my kids are open enrolled into this system. And you would be surprised at the level of participation that you have here, how far it exceeds where my kids should go to school. I mean, I completely agree that it is not about parents do need to be much more involved. But, you know, where my kids should be, you do not get anyone. You never see a parent in the school building. I mean, I know, Jen, you are in here all the time. I'm here all the time. You know, I was in Mrs. Rodriguez's class almost every day last year. But we do, people don't realize you have a decent district out here.
Oh, I know, I
There-
go into school all the time, I know, nobody goes to that school. I know, but, you know, I
people
just have
don't
such a
realize what they
passion for
have.
kids that I don't want to see somebody up there. And like I said, it didn't cost me anything but a night out for dinner. That's all it cost me.
You know,
The 81,000 or 82,000, whatever the deficit that you're projecting, that equates to what, one staff member with benefits and everything?
yeah, probably a little bit, yeah.
With the benefits and then the other question, I just want to make sure, so we're not really looking to go down that list very far.
No.
We're taking, get
Yeah,
rid
as
of
long
one
as-
dean of students, we're looking at $80,000 because they're over there.
Well, the dean of students, some of those things, dean of student, those are teachers that are helping out in an administrative role. One of them is retiring this year. It just won't be replaced. The other one will just go back into the classroom. So we're not really recognizing dollar amount savings on those two positions. We're not going to have those. It'll save us because we don't have to replace those. But we're not, at the end of the day, we're not realizing a lot of savings on that because, and I'll tell you why. We, for a long time, this district in their 5-year forecast did not project retirements because that's such a, it's just a gamble because you never know. We don't have any deadlines. People have to turn stuff in. Well, when that performance audit came in here 3 years ago from the state, one of the things that they said was, in the section on the treasurer's part, was you need to start projecting in. You need to start projecting in retirements and severance payments and that. So Todd started to do that, like the state told him that he needed to. But then you get into situations like this year where there's some people projected in that may or may not go. And so that changes your bottom line within your 5-year forecast, which is why we never done that type of a thing. So you know, the one that's retiring was already projected. So there's not a net savings for us at the end of the day, like there would have been if we weren't expecting that. The other one will go back into the classroom. So those positions are gone. We're not paying anybody to replace those in there, but they're not saving us on the bottom line either. If that makes sense. And there's some other things that are high up there on that list that fall into that same type of category, if that makes sense. So we're still down around that consumer science line when we talk about 1 or 2 positions.
Question, you mentioned when you were talking about the list of teachers that the media, third or fourth one on the list, the media teacher
Yes.
position would actually go back to a language arts position. But you were saying what community services, but then we're lose still
We're-
some media.
I think I'm sorry. What I had intended to say, if I didn't say it, was we wouldn't lose any of our core subject area stuff. But that we are going to lose what Kathy Casper does here in this media center. We will be losing those services. We won't have somebody that can do that. We just felt that the trade-off was it's not going to impact what's happening core-wise in the classroom. She does a lot of stuff to supplement what the teachers do. She does a lot of stuff in here to keep the media center of the district up and running, and we'll lose them. But we felt that that was a hit that we could afford to take before we increased English classes up to 35 kids.
I was just wondering how you decided which order to cut them in, like the younger art as opposed to high school art. I just think that art you instill that when they're young and they become compassionate about it when they're young? How did you decide?
With that, Ms. Early felt that if we eliminated the art at the elementary K through 5 level, that was something that could potentially be picked up by the classroom teachers with part of what they do. Okay. Now, will there be differences in the happen? Sure. I mean, as a teacher, and if anybody asks me to teach art, it will all. So, I mean, so there's trade-offs there, but hopefully we won't completely lose what's there like we would at the older level. We did it at the middle school level. We need that to be able to function with the schedule. We're losing the computer study skills position, and he couldn't lose both to be able to make a schedule function. So there was things like that got decided and talked about that helped clarify what to do. But we tried at the top of that list to put things that in one way, shape, or form we thought would not really take away from what the kids got here as opportunities.
At the board meeting last week, you talked about middle school, I don't know what it's called, classes, that are going to be required to either settle in or eighth grade level. Where does that come from? Is that taught by like?
You're talking about the personal finance?
Right.
I'm sorry.
I'm good.
Last week at the board meeting, we had to pass a resolution that we were required to do by the state. I think that was part of the House Bill 1 a few years ago, part that they didn't repeal recently. That was a resolution on the importance of teaching personal finance and career readiness. So every district in the state had to pass a resolution stating, they give you a sample resolution that you can use, which we use, stating that we'll teach this, and then we also have to submit a plan. So what does that actually mean here? At the middle school level, a lot of that's already being done through social studies classes with things like the Maplewood career visit that comes here and talks to the students and some other things. There's a few pieces that they'll have to pick up. They're looking at some area bankers to come in and talk to the kids about some stuff. At the high school level, the personal finance class that's currently offered as an elective will now be something that's required of all students at some point during their 4 years here. It's a semester length class. So
Those are things that are taught during social studies.
in the middle school level it is, at the high school level it'll be the personal finance business class that Kate teaches. And that's what that was all about. That was something that it's probably a good thing to do. But truth be told, this district or any district in Ohio had any decision on whether to do it or not. It was something we were told we were going to do.
This coming from the state, they can't balance their own budget.
Yeah, that's right.
Perfect.
Is that trend staying the same, or is that going to change?
It should stay the same. This was 08-09, which was the last year when we put this together in the fall. That was the last year that we had the aggregate numbers from everybody on. But it should stay pretty much the same. I haven't seen anything that changed the view as far as where we fall. And we've had the 0% increase on the base the last 2 years for the teacher side.
As far as I know, you guys don't have any turnover, teacher turnover. You don't have
We've
teachers.
never had a tremendous amount of turnover. That's why, again, I never factored in retirements because, until they leave, they're here and they have the right to be here. And we haven't had a significant turnover. In fact, we have a lot of teachers that have, 42, 35 plus years with the district.
I want to make a comment on that too, because that's something else that we've heard a lot about and something we did look into. One of the things we did in the fall was to ask a company out of Indiana, I think it's called EPC if I'm not mistaken. They've worked with a lot of local school districts in Northeast Ohio and probably many other places, many other states, on buyout incentives for employees. And I was familiar with it because Crestwood, where I came from, just did it last year and was recognizing about $2 million in savings over the 8 years that these payouts were made. So we gave them all of the information that they needed to do an analysis. They do the analysis for free. And they came back and told us that as it currently stands for the foreseeable future, they do not see any type of a financial incentive for this district to do any type of a buyout for employees. So we did look at that avenue too, because we do have a lot of people that have been here for a long time. And I think as a new person here, I think that one of the things that I thought when I saw that when I was interviewing last year at this time was, and it speaks pretty highly of this district. You know, you got people that are on the lower end of pay within their own county, very low within the state, and yet they're here for years and years and years. So that has to say something about.
I've got mixed emotions about that. I think teachers should be paid higher than anybody else because they are teaching our kids. However, Wyndham school teachers are making more than Waterloo school teachers, and I guarantee you that nobody from Waterloo would want to go to Wyndham, and anybody from Wyndham would take a pay cut to come here.
Somebody else have any other?
I just wanted to say earlier that we got pretty good around here. I got a sister that lives down by Kings Island, and they cut $5 million out of their budget. And like that, as soon as school's out, they shut the lights off, close the doors, there's no after-school activities whatsoever, and they still got a long way to cut.
Something that just popped in my head when you said turn off the lights and stuff. Another comment I want to make, because those of you that have been here for a number of these meetings, actually, now that you're laughing, that's two comments. It wasn't the one I was thinking of. But I'll address that one too. The first thing I wanted to say was a number of times at these meetings it's been suggested, especially back in December and January, why don't we look at a 4-day work week or a 4-day school week to save costs? As it currently stands, Ohio does school based on the number of school days, not hours like some other states do. We're required to have, at the end of the day, 178 days in a year. And so even if we were to look at shortening the week, that would mean we'd have to lengthen the year, which would probably eliminate any of those savings. If Ohio ever went to a system where they actually recognized total number of hours for public schools instead of days, that would be a very viable option, and an option that a lot of other states have looked into. And from what I understand, there's some success with savings. So right now, that's on hold. I talked to Todd McKinney about that not too long ago, actually.
And you do that for K through 12 or just the high school?
Depends.
Because you'd have to lengthen the day to 10, 11 hours.
Yeah, well, it depends. I think the community schools, I'm not an expert on this, but I think the community schools, charter schools in Ohio right now, they're not held for days, they're held for hours. It's like 920 hours of instruction for a year. So I don't think when there was a bill that was introduced, the place I was first principal at, so about 9 years ago, 10 years ago, there was, I think it was House Bill 10. And they had talked about that, and at that time I did a calculation of what it would have been if it would have went through. And we actually, we were over by maybe an hour a day with what the minimums were. We would have been able to cut like 30 days off of our year, just based off of what those hours were. So it wouldn't have to necessarily get that crazy long. The other thing with these lights, you know, that's a hot topic around town. And I guess I'd say a couple of things about that. Up until this energy efficiency program was done a few years ago, all of that was on one, and this is an area that I'm not smart in, I think one circuit or one break or whatever. You couldn't, if they were all on, if one was on, they were all on. When they did the project, it was broken into two separate sections, and they're not actually all on all the time. There's a group of them, all of them are on during certain parts from the time it gets dark up until I think it's midnight. And then from midnight to 6 a.m., half of them are off. And then it's 6 a.m. until it becomes light out. They all go back on again, the ones that were off. So there is a difference from where we were a couple of years ago. Does there need to be something else that's done? That's something we're actively, let's say we're actively looking at. I don't think we have the funding to go back and try to break it into 3 sections or 4 sections. But maybe we could do something like take some of the bulbs out, some of those posts on.
Have you noticed any savings since December?
You know, we have, with that House Bill program, the first year that they were actually able to measure, was it December when we got those numbers talked? I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, from the year to the new year, it was about $140,000 in savings that the district, well, with all of the energy efficiency.
That was, we had smaller boilers installed, all the lights and valves were changed, the gymnasium and things like that. So it was a combination
Of many things.
several energy efficient projects that the school undertook to reach that savings per year.
Yeah, we want to make that clear. That was not by turning off some of the outside lights for 6 hours a night. That was a combination of many things that were part of that project.
Is the school time going to stay the same next year? I heard one person say that you're looking at changing it to 8:30, but is that likely just going to stay what it is now?
So we haven't had any more discussion on that since December. When we had to move from 2 routes to 1 and decide what to do with the times, ideally would have, quite honestly, would have either like to split the middle or started a little later. But part of our savings was based upon us we have all these different places that we transport students, and there's different times that those buildings start, and if we would have moved later, we wouldn't have been able to run the shuttle buses that we run to those different places where everybody comes here, then the shuttles go. So we had to, but those are things that we're required to pay for. I mean, Ohio,
The community.
when we have students, the students, for example, that we send up to Shalersville to the cooperative learning program or to these other special education units I talked about earlier,
Right.
that's our responsibility to bear those costs. St. Joe's, we have a responsibility according to Ohio Revised Code to transport those students. We have, and these are things that are, they happen. They don't happen frequently, but when they happen, they cost you a lot of money. And you get a student that'll move into the district, and obviously we need to do what's best for that student. They're our student now, and so we do that. But there are students that move in that can cost the district upwards of $60,000 in a given year because of the needs that are there, and that's not what we didn't have that budgeted in. I mean, that swings big time. There's this McKinney-Vento homeless act that requires all school districts to transport students that are homeless if they were in your district prior to becoming homeless, if that was their last known residence. So we've been in situations where we've been transporting a few students a distance to get them to where they're at because by law that's what we're required to do. And so there's all of these things that are embedded within federal and state law that really handcuff the district with what we can do and really impact the money at the end of the day. And we try not to worry about that. We do what we can to save what we can, but at the end of the day, we have to do what's right for our kids, and that's the most important thing.
What are we looking at going forward to keep that $950,000 savings, $950,000? Because that number today isn't the same next year. And we know that. Health insurance is going up. Everything. Heck, McDonald's is more. I mean, everything's more. Fuel is more. What are we doing to save our teachers and keep that number the same?
Well, the stuff to start with, the stuff that's in there
Yeah.
is something that we'll carry forward. We'll carry forward every year, all of that stuff that's there. We have these other things that we're looking into. And, something that's been talked about numerous times at our forums is grants and going after those. And we plan to very soon here actively start to get some people. We have some people in the community that are willing to help with that. We have some other organizations that I don't think will cost us any money that can assist with that, but then we have to order through a certain vendor for things to do. So we're going to get pretty aggressive with that type of stuff. So there's a number of different things that we're looking at, and we'll continually be looking at everything that we do here to make sure that we keep that off the best that we possibly can.
One more thing, I just popped into my head, like tutors and, extra people in the rooms, everybody ever asked for volunteers from the community?
Yeah. That's a great point. That's something that has come up time and time again at these forums. Those of you that have been to them have probably heard the volunteer talk every time. And while we do have volunteers that we utilize here in the buildings, we believe that we can make better use of that too. We just have to figure out responsible ways to do that. We obviously can't have to just go anywhere.
Yeah, we don't want you in here if you're doing it.
Yeah.
I could teach vocabulary.
We have to have some type of a coordinated plan with how we do that. And so this 5-year plan that I told you about, that'll be one of the components that will be part of that, because that has come through very loud and clear from our community. It'll be, how can we go ahead and set up a plan to get more people actively involved in this community? Other things that have come up through these forums are partnerships with local universities. That'll be part of our plan. When we had the curriculum one, there was a lot of talk about an ACT prep class. So in one way, shape, or form, we're going to see what we can do to make that part of what happens here. And the list goes on and on. But a lot of these things that have come up are things that will be addressed in our plan as we move forward. Any other questions? You know, I didn't mention this at the beginning either, but like I said, I'm willing to stay as long as needed. If you have to go, don't feel bad to get up and walk out. No offense taken.
One thing I just want to say, on these levy and things, I still think people can't understand or they don't pay attention to the state budget cuts or the cuts hitting. They think it's the school being just irresponsible. I mean, I think that's with all the schools. It's not just you. And I don't know how you get it through to people that it's not just the schools, it's the state cuts.
I started to prove it now, though.
Yeah, but I mean, there's so many hard-headed people that aren't even listening.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised how much smarty will fall around town tomorrow.
No,
They don't go around.
my wife is a typical one that'll sit home and complain and everything else about how bad things are, but she won't get out and do anything about it. So that's why I'm here.
Well, the facts that were brought up of
They
the
were
bullet
good. We're online.
points that we have lost from the state, those have to get out to the community.
Yeah,
What
and I
funding have we lost to show?
Yeah, and I think there's so many hard-headed people that they just,
But
Because
because
more-
I think
above
with
them,
most
they don't try to-
hard-headed people, you keep repeating it and you keep simplifying it and you
Yes.
keep black and whiting it. And here's the bullet points, here's the million we lost, or the 5 million they decided to pull out from under us. That's important, and we have to keep each avenue, whether it's the internet, whether it's mailings, whether it's billboards, I don't know.
I know, some
But it's
people are just
more and
so-
more, and just keep it out there.
I say the only thing we haven't done is rented a plane for the whole day.
Somebody around has a
You know,
plan.
I'm telling you right now, though, I voted down the Monday before, but I'd vote for it now.
I
Because
say
I
give you
feel
your
like
sign.
they made an effort
All right.
to change.
You ever seen them things at Free
Yeah, I'm
Students where they stand out along on the sidewalk and they have, I'll paint one of those up and I'll stand out in front of Bob's.
Wait, Rick, I'm going to get to you in just a second. I think, let's go back to what somebody said earlier, and I think it was up here. I think the most effective thing that can happen with communication is people coming, learning about it, whether it's through this, whether it's making public record requests and looking at it themselves and taking the time to formulate their own opinions, and then talking to the people that they talk to, who then turn and talk to the people they talk to, and it just becomes this big sphere of influence. And I think that's what, if something's going to change it, we can try all of these other things and we'll do everything we can to do all of those things, but at the end of the day, nothing is going to be more effective than people talking to the people they know, and then those people talking to more and talking to more. Now, I'll put it out there a number of times, if there's some group that you know of that would be good to come and talk to, I'll show up. Todd's welcome to join me and probably go. We've been all over the place. We tried to hold a coffee or an informational thing back in the fall over at Dog's Pub House. And nobody showed
Yeah, but he's not the dogs are
We didn't have anybody show up, but we got to eat some good pizza. There was a good time, but we're willing to go and talk to anybody, anywhere. It's just finding where those places are to go to.
Well, I think the website helps, keep that website updated with the facts. We don't have the time to go digging through all the state sites and all the BS and the crap that's out there. And the forums, and keep the facts out there and keep it simple. Keep your bullet points, here's when we cut X, Y, and Z. Here's when the last levy was passed and what we've done in between to extend it 16 years. You've got to keep the facts out there for the community. Whether it's the website, whether it's paper, the 3-page fact sheet, I've been carrying that darn thing around for a week now. But it's been a conversation piece.
Sure.
We didn't have that in the past. We've had it hidden. It's been buried under crap. And that's why the community is upset.
Rick?
You ever have any input on the technology you're using there? Or how many people watch that?
Yeah, you know, we can get on, I can get on and take a look at how many people viewed it, and I believe what that means is people that actually clicked on the video and started it.
That leads me to my second question. The governor just put back on, talking about our kids not being educated in the United States. We had the 3 snow days and we put back 5. You mentioned that one of the other meetings we had about schooling kids that didn't come to school, possibly do a system where you would put them online through going to school.
Sure.
To make up the extra, to me, when you take a kid out of the school for 5 days, on the snow days, whatever happened, that kid didn't go to school. You're neglecting that kid in a taxpayer that paid for an education. 5 days that child didn't go to school. To me, that would be, is it safe for a teacher to go to school? I went to work for 40 years on snow days. The teacher's going to go to school. Is it possible you could have it bring them to school and have a meeting or some kind of a beneficial thing? I thought about that one other time. Because you had a meeting with the teacher, they had a day off, and everybody said, why all the kids off? Well, the teachers went to school that day, and you had an in-house.
Professional
You
development.
could do it on the same thing, if you're getting 5 days off, bring them in, and get the, use the money that the taxpayer paid for.
Okay.
Another thing, they did a survey on the Governor Day on his 100-day performance. And I just heard 5 chuckles. He was sent here to do one thing. This state of Ohio is going out the door. And he was sent here, you look back that I was a union man for 40 years. Right or wrong, he was trying to bring this Ohio back. Look at the jobs, I don't know if he saved them, they're already in the books. He mentioned like 5 or 6 jobs that he kept here, in Firestone is building a plant. Like about 3 others, one down in Canada. Is he doing a good job? But he cut a lot of people, hurt a lot of people. Right now, everybody, probably every teacher, every union person think he's SOB. But if he is, but if he turns around and brings back jobs so the kids can get education or college education, don't have to leave here to another state to go to work, then he succeeded. I don't know. But right now, it looks like he's hurt me because it reflects on my income from what I pay on hospital. I call the benefit service thing, my wife's insurance. I had insurance for 4 years through my insurance. We will be affected, anybody who's on those policies. But she said, we haven't heard, and we'll probably go into effect June or July on the negotiations you did with the union.
Sure.
Probably went June or July.
Yeah, July.
Okay. So,
You know, I think about it a lot too, and I think I've said at these meetings before, whether you like what he's doing or not. You know, we're at a loss here with $1 million. I can't imagine what it must be like to have a job where you're trying to cut people and generate money. So, you know, we have to keep all of that into perspective here too. But, you know, at this local level, the reason we're in the situation we are is because the state's where it is. And that's, you know, that's the truth of the matter. And we'll see how things go. And maybe, you know, buying some time, maybe things do start to get better. That's all you can hope. And that's all I think we can do. I think that the responsible thing right now is to ask the community to help us out for an additional year. And then we go from there and see what transpires. And hope it gets better. Any other thoughts, comments, questions?
Thank you.
We'll stick around here for a while if there's any individual questions. Don't forget, if you didn't and we don't have your email, sign in by the door on the counter over here by this computer. And then there's levy signs by the door if you didn't get one of those.